Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. What is it? What do you get? And is it worth it? Stay tuned to find out the answers. Hello and welcome to a brand new series covering the Warhammer 40,000 Conquest subscription. Now, what is it? Well, it's a weekly subscription that goes into the narrative of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It will also show you how to build and paint your own miniatures and then learn how to play the tabletop game. Now, if you are to subscribe to it, you will get some free gifts. The first lot being some clippers, which are a basic set, nothing too fancy, and as long as you look after them they can last, but they can break very easily. You'll also get some plastic glue, which is your standard plastic glue. Again, you wouldn't really need it till later on, as a lot of the beginning kits are push fit. And you'll also get a mold line remover, which is good, it's handy. It's a little bit fiddly because it doesn't have the larger handle, but it's good for neatening up those little knobbly bits on your components. Now, in your first issue, you'll get 3 pots of paint. You'll get base colours, Abaddon Black, Crag Blue and Retributor Armour, perfect for painting your Ultramarines. You'll also get a sprue with 3 intercessors on, one of which is a Sergeant. And then you'll also get a starter brush. It's nothing too fancy and it will take you time to paint things, but it's a good step in the right direction. You will get more paints and brushes further on in the subscription. Now, thanks to Vincint Knotley, link is in the description, I'm going to go through the price breakdown because as you can see you get a lot. You get a lot of scenery, 2 whole armies, but you also get lots of paints, brushes, dice and tons of extras. So, for the subscription on its own, the 80 issues is £625 for the standard subscription and £745 for the premium subscription, where you get every 20 issues a special box with lots of freebies in it. If you were to buy the figures on their own as cheap as possible from Games Workshop, the Death Guard will cost you £315.50. Ultramarines £348.50, and that's not with the limited figure that you get in this series. The scenery is £212, that's a total of £876. You can have a savings of at least £250, and that's without all the freebies. So now that we've gone over the value of the subscription, I'm going to walk you through the building stage. Now, to start off, you'll need your clippers and the sprue, and you'll also need your first issue. If you have a look to the building stage, you'll see that Sergeant Decius requires the components 1 through 6, which you'll find on the sprue numbered 1 to 6. Now, when clipping these pieces out, you'll want to make sure that the flat side of the clippers is facing the piece that you want to clip out. This is so you can get as close as possible to the piece and have as little leftover plastic as possible. Make sure that you are careful not to clip off the pegs on the sides of the torso and on the base of the neck. This is because you're going to need these pieces to hold everything together without using any glue. Once you've finished clipping out the components that you need, you then grab your mold line remover and pick up the component that you wish to neaten up. Now, on these components you will notice there's a faint line running along the edges of them. This is where the mold is pressed together and it's unavoidable, but the lines aren't that noticeable these days. You also get a little knobbly bit where you clipped it off the sprue. This is also normal, so what the mold line removal will do is help remove that. So angling it so that you get the corner edge of the mold line remover. You just scrape along the edge of the area that you wish to smoothen down. This is a lot better than using a knife, as it means that you're less likely to cut pieces off the model that you don't really want to lose. Once you've finished neatening up your components, you're then going to want to put it together. Now, with the two torso halves, I did find that I ended up with a little bit of a gap. So to reduce this, I snipped off maybe 1 millimeter off the ends of the pegs. This is to allow for any of the trapped air that might have occurred in the sockets. If you are going to glue, I would suggest removing the pegs completely. This is because the pegs are designed to fit the sockets perfectly. If you put any glue in the sockets, it's going to take up that additional space that was made for the pegs. So to save any headache, I would just glue around the edge of the torso. But with this glue, less is more. So when you are happy with how it all fit together, you can then start actually putting it together. Now in the instructions it does say to put the head on the front part of the torso and then put the back part on the torso. But you'll find that the head is quite fiddly and it will just fall around. So instead of putting the head on the shoulders and then having it fall around and wasting time fiddling around, I put the back half of the torso just slightly on and left enough of a gap so that I could put the pin on the base of the neck for the head into the shoulders. Once I put that in place, I then fully squeezed it together and it fitted perfectly. Now again, you will notice the very slightest of gaps, but this is normal, and once painted you won't really notice it. If you are a bit funny about that, you can always use the mold line remover to scrape across the gap, and this will help push some of that plastic into the gap and fill it out. Once you are happy with how the head is posed, you can then go on to posing the arms. Now you can always go for a heroic pose or dynamic pose, it's up to you, but these arms are fully posable. Again, you don't need glue for this, as the peg will hold him firm. You then put on the backpack, put him on the base, and there you have it. Your Sergeant Decius is completed. You then do the same stages for your other two intercessors. And this is how they will look like. So to get started with painting, you're going to need your paintbrush, water, kitchen towel, paint and palette. We're going to start with Macragge Blue, as this colour covers the majority of the figures and really signifies that they are the Ultramarines. So give that paint pot a real good shake and wet your brush, because you want to make sure the bristles are nice and soft. When you dry the brush, make sure that you make the bristles into a fine point, as this will keep the brush in good condition. Now, as you can see, I am using the packaging as a palette, but this is because it is quite ideal for the job. Now when you're removing some of the paint from the pot, make sure that you don't let the paint go more than halfway up the bristles. This is because if the paint gets up into the ferrule, which is the metal part holding the brushes together, it can dry in there and it's very difficult to get out. And what will happen is the bristles will start going off in different directions, ruining that fine point that you want to keep. Once you've got enough paint on your palette, you're then going to want to mix just a little bit of water in there to get a nice smooth consistency. Make sure you don't make it too watery. Then you can apply the paint onto the miniature. making sure you do not obscure any of the details with too much paint. If you do it in a thin enough layer, then once you've gone through all three, you can then go back to the first one and the paint should be dry. And you can do a second layer, really just to thicken and bolden that base coat. So the next stage is to paint Abaddon black. Now follow the same tips as the first stage with Crag blue. So you want to make sure that you thin the paint, point your brush, and not obscure the detail by putting too much paint. You will definitely want to put at least 2 thin even coats of this colour onto the plastic, as it is a blue plastic and the blue may show through the black if it is an uneven coating. So you want to colour in the details like the gaps between the armour plates, the gun holsters, the rifles themselves, and some other details which you'll find in your issue. Don't worry if you make a mess, as you can always go back over it later on. Lastly is to use Retributor armour. Now this will be for the chest detail, the little detail on the rifle, and also for the edges of the shoulder guards. Now a little pro tip here is, if you do spill over while the paint is still wet, rinse that brush, get the worst of the water off but keep it wet, and just go over the little bit that's spilled, and this will help to smear away the paint. If you do it well, you get rid of all of it. For the edges of the shoulder pads, just run the brush at an angle just to catch the raised edges, like so. Once you've finished painting, make sure that you rinse your brush properly and keep that brush tip in a fine point. You want to keep that in good condition. Make sure that the paint pots are closed properly so they don't spill or dry out. And once your models are dried, you can put them in the box as well to keep them safe for your further issues. And there you have it, your first 3 miniatures partly painted. Well done. Now if you did like this video, please like, share and subscribe. The details are below.